Good morning. ¿Se escucha? Good morning. Welcome to the last day of the Congress. First, we would like to thank you all for your engagement over these three last days. Without your questions and opinions, we wouldn't have such rich discussion. We now have the pleasure of Carlos Scolari to close the Congress. Carlos is an essential reference in digital media, interactions, and communication ecology. He has published several books, of which we would like to highlight Narrativa, Transmedia Narratives, and Ecología de los Medios as key research resources to understand how the media have evolved and to trace out the future of communication, of education by transmedia. Currently, he's working on a project, Transmedia Literacy, which is part of the innovative program Horizon 2020. The project aims to understand how teenagers are learning skills outside the school, and the project will also produce a teacher's kit that is designed to facilitate the integration of transliteracies in the classroom. Let's give him a warm welcome to Carlos Scolari.
Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for coming. Thanks to the organization committee of this conference. Unfortunately, I could only come today. It would be great to stay here 2 3 days, but it was almost impossible because we are working a lot, and I'm going to talk about that right now, so you will understand why it's so difficult. I think, but it's the situation of everyone. We are living in a very high society, high life. Not high life in money, I'm talking about the velocity of everyday activities and the fragmentation, atomization. I am also going to talk about that. I prepared my presentation in Spanish with a little words in English. I didn't realize that the conference was in English. So when I arrived here, I started watching everywhere. Oh, in English. Okay, I'm going to speak in English. I don't have a lot of words, so it's easy to understand. My presentation is more or less divided in 3 parts. The first part is about media literacy. You already know a lot about that, but just an overview on media literacy. The second part is about what's going on in the media ecology. She said before, media ecology, communication ecology. I don't come from education studies, I come from media studies, so I think it's very important to more or less to understand what's going on in the field of the media ecology. And the last part of the presentation is about transmedia literacy. These 2 projects we are working right now in Spain and in different countries. Then I think we have time for questions and conversations. That's the most important part. Okay, what's media literacy or alfabetismo mediático? I think this, obviously it is a theory, but it's also a practice that starts or has developed from a critical point of view of media. If we analyze the evolution of media theories and media research, we have always this area of the effects of media. It's a classic in media studies. We started with the media studies in 100 years ago, more or less, in the 20s, between the First and the Second World War, when cinema, radio were the big media. The media studies started more or less in that period, and the theory of effects, or the different theories of effects, they are one of the classics in media studies. We had many theories, but this is one of the most important, maybe also in the USA, one of the most important research objects for the last 100 years at least. Media, according to this vision, that I don't agree a lot with this vision, but from this perspective, media had negative effects. I think that media are very complex, and they do not only produce negative effects, but in the mainstream of this reflection, media had negative effects on people and especially on children. And that's more or less the fundamentals of this conception, I think, of media literacy. We had many theories. Maybe in the beginning we used to have this basic behaviorist point of view about the media in the 30s, 40s. Then we had middle-range theories, and then we have the arrival of cultural studies, more complex vision of media, the relationship between media, people, media, and society. But I think this idea that media, and when I say media, I say television is bad for people, or television is bad for children, is a constant in the last 50 years, since the arrival of television. And what we can say is in the late 60s, I remember the Congress of the United States, they invited researchers to tell them, what was the real situation with media. And they said, well, we have 30, 40 years of research about media effects, and we still do not know anything about that, because some empirical studies confirm that media had a lot of effects, and the other ones say that maybe they are not so important. So more or less we continue in this situation. I'm from Argentina, so you can see Mafalda is one of my classics, and I think for many people. And the television is a classic of this idea of television is negative, television is bad. We are in the late 60s. Mafalda is a comic strip from the late 60s, and this idea of television is negative is central in the discourse of this comic. In this context, we started talking about media literacy. Obviously, we used to have a traditional literacy about writing and reading. Now they develop in that period, in the 60s, 70s, they start thinking about, well, how can we teach students how to resist, how to develop a critical interpretation of the media, and especially television. Here we can see here in Google Books the increasing of publications about media literacy. We can see in the late 70s, more or less, this increasing amount of literacy works, articles, papers, books about media literacy. So this is more or less the situation. What can we do? If media are negative, we should teach critical skills, we should teach, or we should inoculate resistant elements in the body of people, especially children, to resist these negative messages coming from the media in general, but also from television. That's more or less the basic first idea around media literacy. If you remember, maybe in the 70s, more or less, yes, early 70s, Umberto Eco was talking about the semiotics guerrilla. He was talking about that, teaching people how to resist the negative messages from mass media. So it's more or less the philosophy of that moment. Here I have 5 classical principles of media literacy. This idea that the media construct messages, construct the realities also. Interpretation is a broad process, so anyone can interpret in a different way. Media convey values, different point of view. They are companies. The final objective is to make money, let's say. This is more or less the idea of principles of this media literacy. But media literacy is not only about teaching children, teenagers to resist the negative effects of media. In the last maybe 20, 25 years, the schools or the media literacy programs, they have introduced also the production. So it's not about only developing a critical approach to media, to negative effects, but also to learn how to produce communication inside the school. So we can see in the first time this competence between, on one side we have the school, on the other side we have the media. There's a little war for the construction of meaning. We see that the school is fighting against the media. Television used to be considered something really bad. We can open here a reflection. I think every time that a new technology arrives, the school closes itself. Outside, no, we don't want technologies, new technologies. The school is full of technologies. The blackboard is a technology, the book is a technology. But as they are old technology, they don't recognize as technologies. So everything new should be kept outside the school. It happened in the 60s with television. Then after maybe 10, 15 years, schools introduce video, introduce screens inside the classroom. And then the calculator. When I was in school, I remember, no, never use the calculator because you have to learn math. And they introduced finally calculator. And the same with personal computers. No, computer outside. Now all the schools are asking for computers. Now the bad technology is mobile phones. No, outside mobile phones. No? When children, they leave the school, or the parents, the moms are outside with a mobile phone, so they give the children the mobile back, so they arrive to the real world, they receive the interface, so maybe in 5-10 years, mobile phone will be a normal technology inside the school. So I think this, when we talk about media ecology, we should talk also about media evolution, and we see that this is a repetition of the same process. No? First, no, we don't accept this because this is a new technology. Then, well, finally, we accept that because a new one has arrived. Let's go back. Media literacy, we have on one side, create a barrier, inoculate elements for resisting the attack of media, and on the other side, to produce. And this is, both of these activities, I think, are very important. I think we must teach or work with media literacy inside the school, like any other. If we teach students to read books and to read critically a book, we should also teach them to read critically media. On the other side, I think that producing media inside school is a beautiful thing. It's very funny, and I'm thinking about radio and thinking about newspapers or video production. I think we should work more and more on this side. Okay. And this is more or less the situation today of media literacy, with different discussions and different semantic approaches. And also in the last 20 years, since the arrival of the web and the digital networks, we have this big discussion about the new literacies. I stop this part here. Let's see. I like to talk a little bit about what's going on in the media ecology. The idea of media ecology, or ecology of media, is a metaphor, but it is also a under construction theoretical model. In the sense, the first one to talk about media ecology was Marshall McLuhan in the early 60s. He, in private conversations, letters, we are talking about 50 years ago, they used to send letters, written letters, and he talked about media ecology. One of his friends, colleagues, Neil Postman from the New York University, McLuhan was in Toronto, Neil Postman was in New York University and working together with McLuhan. He was the first one to talk about media ecology in a public conference in 1968. So the first one to talk about media ecology or media as an environment was Neil Postman in the late 60s. And in 71, Neil Postman created the first media ecology program in New York University. McLuhan died in 1980, Neil Postman died in 2002. So we have now a second and third generation of people, many of them from Canada, many of them from the USA, that work with McLuhan or Postman. People like Paul Levinson, people in New York, or Lance Strait, they were the students of McLuhan or students of Neil Postman. Robert Logan also in Toronto. Media ecology. I think there are two basic principles in media ecology. One is this idea that media, they create an environment, and we live in this environment. This environment is transforming us, and we do not realize about that. It's unconscious. That was one of the basic ideas of Marshall McLuhan and Neil Postman. We live in this environment, a media environment. Marshall McLuhan used to say, I do not know who discovered water, but I'm sure it was not a fish. The fish is in the water, but the concept of water is impossible for a fish. When you take the fish out of the water, you realize that there was something there. It's like the atmosphere for us. We don't realize, we're not thinking the air. If we close here for 2 weeks, after 2 weeks we say, oh, I can't breathe. There was an atmosphere. So we live in a media ecology, we live in a media environment that is transforming us. These were the intuition of McLuhan in the early 60s. Now, neuroscience is confirming that. that media, technologies in general, transforming the structure of cognitive structures, perception structure, but also the organic structure of the brain. There are transformations along our life because of technologies. If you have seen this book, Nicholas Carr book about how Google or the internet is stupidizing us, he analyzes or he recovers a research about the brain of taxi drivers in London. Because of the arrival of GPS technology, some parts of the brain are changing the structure. Because before the GPS, the taxi drivers in London, they used to have the whole map of the city here. Now they don't need that anymore because the map is on the technology. So this part of the brain is reducing. So we are talking about physical mutations, not only a level of cognition, not only about perception. Okay? This is one of the basic ideas of Marshall McLuhan. The other idea in media ecology, I think is important also, is that media are like biological species living in the same ecosystem. Here we have the lake of Banyolas, and we have an ecology, an equilibrium in the lake of Banyolas. Okay? Do we have any professor from Brazil here? No one from Brazil? Let's suppose that we have one professor from Brazil, and this professor from Brazil, he takes from Brazil piranhas, and he put one piranha or two, a couple, in the Banyolas lake. What happens? The piranhas will eat other fishes, and the whole equilibrium of this lake of Banyolas will break. So the same is happening in the media ecology. We used to have an equilibrium, more or less, before the web. Television was the T-Rex in this ecosystem. Television was the big predator of audiences. Then cinema, radio, newspaper, more or less, they were, the ecosystem was in equilibrium, and each media has its own place inside this ecology. And cinema was working, more or less, collaborating with television, more or less. Okay. What happened? The piranhas have arrived. Piranhas is the web, not only the web. The web is the place where we create new piranhas. I'm talking about Facebook, I'm talking about YouTube, I'm talking about Flickr, I'm talking about blogs, I'm talking about Twitter, I'm talking about the Snapchat, I'm talking about all the new media experiences, also mobile phones, also devices. So what happened? The traditional equilibrium of the media ecology is broken, and we have not arrived until to the new equilibrium. So we have new piranhas arriving every week. Because now it seems to be that Facebook is a big piranha, but Facebook, I think, has arrived to the top. Now we are working with children, teenagers of 12 years old, and they not use Facebook. They're not thinking using Facebook because parents, we are in Facebook, so they don't want to be in Facebook, obviously. So they're using a combination of Snapchat, Instagram, and WhatsApp for communication. So I don't know, in 5 or 10 years, if we will arrive to a new equilibrium in the media ecology. Because media ecology is a complex system, and it's impossible to think about a complex system in 10, 5, 15 years. Because maybe tomorrow, a new Steve Jobs creates something new and transforms everything in a couple of months. Think what happened about mobile phones. In 2005, Nokia was Finland. Tampere was at the center of the whole mobile ecology. Steve Jobs arrived one day, he took one phone and changed the whole market, and now Nokia is a second or third class company. The web, the big environment for this, is less than 8,000 days old. The web is less than 8,000 days old. That's nothing, the evolution of our humankind. That's nothing, it's the last second. YouTube is 10 years old. Twitter is less than 10 years old. So it's great what's happening. It's very complex, it's great. The main element between the old media ecology and the new one is that before, the main form of communication was broadcasting, one-to-many. And now we are talking about a new paradigm, it's called networking, many-to-many. Does it mean that broadcasting will disappear? No, we still have broadcasting, but the networking logic is occupying the center of the media ecology. And we have conflicts and collaboration at the same time. At the same time, we have remix structures or experiences. For example, we have broadcasting inside the net. For example, when this guy jumped from the stratosphere, the Red Bull, there were about 7-8 million people watching that in real time in YouTube. That's broadcasting inside the net. So we can see we still have broadcasting, we have the network paradigm, but we also have combinations, strange combinations. In the 90s, I was living in Italy. We had the arrival of this new thing. We were producing CD-ROMs and floppy disk, multimedia CD-ROMs, and 94, 95, the web arrived, the new browsers, and we didn't know how to produce content for this new media. We didn't have a web design manual in 95, 96. So it was just trying to invent something, trying to apply old things. Marshall McLuhan, he used to say that the content of a new media is an old media. So the content of the new media, the web or metamedium, were the old media. So the guy that was selling advertising on newspaper starts selling banners, more or less the same. And we have the traditional Britannica encyclopedia. Now we have the Britannica, online Britannica in the 90s. So we had the arrival of a translation of all contents into the new media. I think now we have the inverse situation. Now all media are copying the new media, because now the centrality is on interactive and digital media. So let's expand the metaphor. So if the old media want to survive in the new media ecology, they have to adapt, like in biological environments. The old media have to adapt. How do they adapt? They must adopt traits from the new media. So if television, traditional television, wants to arrive to the new generations, they have to talk in a different way. If newspapers want to keep the readers, they must introduce elements from web design. Today, newspapers are printed websites. The fragmentation of information, infographics, colors, pictures, short articles. So it's a web page. It's not a journal. If you compare Diari de Girona today and 55 years ago, it's completely different. Well, it's an old media trying to adapt in the new media ecology. This process hasn't finished yet. And that's the good thing for people working in research and also for professionals of communication, education. I think I'm happy to be living this transition. It's very funny. It's very complex. You have to be very creative, especially for professionals. If you want to survive in this new media ecology, if you have a little media company or advertising, or you work in journalism or whatever, you have to be very fast. You have to process a lot of information to imagine, because sometimes you are making a lot of money with a specific kind of product or technology, and tomorrow you're out of the market. So that's, to be a communicator today is like being an engineer in 19th century in Birmingham. I don't know, to be an artist in Florence in the 15th century, I don't know. So I'm happy about what's going on. We have a big band of new media species. We used to have in the old media ecology a series of media. Now this is what's happening. This in biology is called punctuated equilibrium. It's a theory, equilibrio puntuado, punctuated equilibrium. It's a theory based about the evolution of the planet. The evolution of the planet has not been similar at the same rhythm along the millions of years. No, we had moments like in the Precambric, 250 million years ago. There was an explosion of new species, many mutations. And then we have big extinctions also in our planet. So it seems that in some moments, the evolution accelerates. We have a lot of bifurcations, new species, and then we have big extinctions. I think it's happening something like that in the media ecosystem. Now we are living a huge explosion of new media, new platforms. So a lot of mutations every day, every week. We have a new social network, a new startup, a new application. Many of them will die, will not survive. But maybe one of these will change the whole thing, because media ecology is a complex system. So any element, little element may produce a big change in the whole system. The digital networks are an organic, complex environment that expands, evolves. I'm going to show you a couple of videos. This is called organic interface. It's a graphic interactive representation of the activity of a website. When we usually navigate, yes, we're in front of the screen, but at the same time we have maybe millions or thousands of people in the same website interacting at the same time. And we know that servers process this information. We have the big data. We can watch this activity. This is the only media where you can watch in real time what's people doing. You can't do this with newspaper. You can't do this with radio, television. That's because people from marketing is very excited about this. It's the only media, the only environment that you can get in real-time information about what's people doing with your content, where are they going. But I think the idea is this organic idea about the web, the complexity. We have many good experiences. This is a beautiful website. You can see in numbers. Sorry. Okay. You arrive to this website, and since the moment you start, you can see what's happening on the nets, on the different networks. You can see how much money, I'm going to refresh this, and you're going to see how much money are the companies making. The only one that's not making money is Twitter. It's losing money, but you can see how many thousands of videos or minutes of conversation, tweets, applications download. I recommend you check the internet in real time, and you will see this activity of the web in the networks, not only the web, the networks in general, in real time. There are many of these websites. There's another one that shows you what happened. Here we have the money, how much money they're making. There's another website where you can see what happens if you print on paper all the pictures that we have now in Instagram. So you have the Empire State, and the machine starts printing. You have all the pictures. So, wow, the Empire State, whoa. It grows. We have the Everest mountain. The pictures, wow. We have the space station. The pictures, if we print all the pictures right now on Instagram, wow, we go over the space station. If we print all the pictures that we have today in Instagram, we will arrive more or less 50% of the distance from the Earth to the Moon. Never in the history of humankind we have something like this, a huge amount of information, interactions. And we are adapting to that, and we are surviving. In 1 hour, in this presentation, you will see more images, inputs, words, ideas, concepts that maybe one man in Girona in 15th century, in just half an hour. And we are surviving that. It's difficult, especially for adults, but we are surviving that. We have a huge adaptation capacity. What else is happening in the media ecology? This is beautiful. This is a project where you can hear the Wikipedia. So anytime that someone upgrades the Wikipedia, you can see different bubbles. If they upgrade a lot, an article, you will see the big bubble. If they just retouch, change a little element, you will see a little circle. The Wikipedia is also an environment inside the environment. And you can see that the activity in real time, thousands of people navigating the Wikipedia, but thousands of people interacting, changing, upgrading, and they have created this beautiful representation of that. There's another project that you can see the Wikipedia as a galaxy, and you can navigate from one planet, from one solar system to the other one, and you can check the information. I recommend you, if you work with a student, it's beautiful to show them how it works. What else? What's happening in the new media ecology? We have new interfaces, we have new formats, we have new actors. For example, new formats. This is a beautiful application. The question is, what's this? Is it a book? Is it an interactive book? Is it a musical instrument? Is it a book for painting? What we used to call a traditional multimedia production. Multimedia in the sense that there is a convergence of different languages, grammars, media into a single interface, into a single product. The CD-ROMs I used to produce when I was in Italy in the 90s, they were multimedia CD-ROMs. The websites are multimedia in the sense that we have video, text, pictures, everything. Most of the mobile applications for tablets or smartphones, they are also multimedia productions. So this is one logic: concentration, convergence of different languages, different grammars and media into a single interface, into a single product. We also have new actors.
50 cosas sobre mí. Muy buenas, ¿qué tal, señor? Estos son las.
These are the new actors in the new media ecology everywhere. In Spain, in Ibero-America, and I've been in Saudi Arabia last week and also there. The YouTubers or video bloggers or whatever. Rubius, he already has more than 17 million subscribers. He's like a rock star. Many famous YouTubers are moving to Los Angeles. And well, this is just one example of new actors in the new media ecology. These are the new piranhas, because the new generations, children, early teenagers, they watch video bloggers, they don't watch traditional broadcasting. What do traditional media produce? For example, Comedy Channel, they have produced, Comedy Central, they produce a program, cable television, called, in Spain, called YouTubers. And they copy this style, the website, the webcam, they copy that in more or less traditional television. So if all media want to survive, they have to adapt. And we'll see. I'm very curious about the evolution of YouTubers, because they are the target. They are children from teenagers, maybe 17, 18 years old. So it's a target that's growing up very fast. So I don't know, and they are also very young. They are maybe 24, 26, 27 years old. So I like to see the evolution of these YouTubers. I'm going to talk about our research, but we are already detecting very young teenagers that they are producing videos and they are creating channels. Children from my generation and the next generation, they wanted to be football players. Now they want to be YouTubers, because they make a lot of money. When you have 1 million subscribers, you start making a lot of money in YouTube. So we have new actors, we have new interfaces, we have new formats. So many changes in the new media ecology. So that's why I say this is a complex system. It's very difficult to say where this will finish. Before, in the old media ecology, we used to spend a lot of a lot of time in little media. We used to read the newspaper in the morning, then many hours maybe listening to radio, then television, and maybe once a month or 15 days we used to go to the cinema. Now in the new media ecology we spend a little time in a lot of media. because we are a little bit in YouTube, then we go to the website, then we go to Netflix, then we go to Facebook, then a little bit on Twitter, then we go in Snapchat, then we go to WhatsApp. That's crazy. I will not talk about fragmentation. I would talk about atomization of media consumed. And this is happening. Here, Wire Magazine, they said more or less 9 hours in the USA, they spend consuming and producing information, but it's not only about consuming. People is also producing information, prosumers. What happens is atomization, and it's not only about commercial productions. Also, a one-to-one conversation follows this path. Maybe I receive a private message in Twitter with a friend, and we start sending messages, and they say, no, let's go to a chat or something like that, because it's very short, Twitter. And finally, oh, no, okay, I Skype you. So one conversation may jump from one media to the other one, or from one platform to the other one. So this is a transversal process. This is good. This variety of our media diet is good. Experts say that for our body it's very good to have a variety of food, to eat a little bit of vegetables, a little bit of meat and fruit and whatever, and not eat the same product. The same here. I think that this is good for us, to have a lot of inputs and many places for communication. Also, this is a polyphonic system. This is good for democracy. This is good for the society, I guess. We also have the risk of infoxication, obviously. That's the dark side of the moon. But we are also dealing with that. But I think I prefer this chaos with infoxication, but I prefer this and not traditional system with maybe 1, 2, or 3 voices and nothing else. So I think this is a richer situation. This is good for people, I guess. I think it's good for society. But this is terrible for media companies. The business of media companies was to sell people, millions of people watching television, the same program at the same time, or listening to the radio. And that situation doesn't exist anymore. This idea of the family around the television at home doesn't exist anymore. Everyone is watching something different in a different device. Fragmentation, no, atomization. And that's terrible for the big traditional broadcasting companies, because this is a bomb inside the business model of the companies. So, one possibility of connecting points, connecting this different fragmented or this atomization of consume and producing also moments, one possibility, one strategy could be to create a narrative that integrates the different moments of the different media or the different platform. And that is what we call transmedia storytelling. Or at least this is one of the characteristics of transmedia storytelling. Before, in the old media ecology, audiences were media-centered. Oh, I have 5 million spectators. I have 2.5 million listeners. I have 500,000 readers. So the definition of the audience or the consumers were media-centered. Now, from this perspective, audiences or consumers are narrative-centered. We have the fans of Harry Potter. We have the fans of El Rubius. We have the fans of Iron Man. We have the fans, consumers in general, that like Indiana Jones. And if they like Indiana Jones or if they like Iron Man, they're going to go to the movies, to the cinema, they're going to buy the DVD, they're going to buy the comic books, they're going to buy the novel, they're going to buy the video game, and they're going to go to the attraction in Disneyland or Euro Disney or whatever. So this is another transformation. In old media ecology, we used to have media-centered audiences. Now we can talk, from the perspective of transmedia storytelling, about narrative-centered audiences. This proposal or this strategy doesn't mean that we will go back to broadcasting. We will never, I think, reconstruct the big audiences of broadcasting. Maybe in some specific events. The final of the FIFA World Cup, for example. We will have, 1,000 million people watching the same game. maybe. It's 2 hours, one day. Now, this is a way of connecting points, but we will never have again these huge audiences, broadcasting audiences, watching the same at the same time, at the exception of specific moments. So what's a transmedia storytelling? It's fandom plus canon. As Henry Jenkins says, on one side we have the media industry, and on the other side we have fandom, collaborative cultures, participatory cultures. Henry Jenkins, he talks about convergence. When Jenkins talks about convergence culture, he's talking about the convergence of these two cultures, media industry and participatory cultures or collaborative cultures. Convergence is a cool concept, but I think the name of the book, or Henry Jenkins' book, is Convergence Culture. But I think it's very important, the subtitle of the book, When Old and New Media Collide. So we have convergence, but at the same time we have conflict. So these are two different words, because on that side they want to make money, they take care of the copyright. On this side, they do not care about copyright. Fans do whatever they want, the prosumers or fans, they produce fan fiction, and they do not care about money. So at the same time, we have different logics, and we have conflict, convergence. So that's what's going on. So I have talked about the traditional idea of media literacy. I have talked about the transformation of the media ecology. Inside the media ecology, transmedia storytelling is one of the important elements. There are many, but it's one of the important elements emerging from the new media ecology. For this conception, transmedia ecology is, on one side, we have this official production. We tell the story in different media and platforms. That's the commercial part of transmedia, let's say. And on the other side, we have the wild side of the road, is the part of fan fiction, participatory cultures, parodies, alternate. Many new formats are being created by users, user-generated contents. Many new formats, synchronizations. We have recaps, fake trailers, recut trailers. There are many things growing up outside. Okay, and let's go to the last part. What are youth doing with media? What are children doing with media? What are teenagers doing with media? I'm going to show you a little video, it's a commercial video.
Mi abuela es muy linda, joven. A veces bueno y a veces muy rezongón. Esto es una computadora.
Abro.
Sostener acá. Estamos en internet. Ponemos Google 99.
¿Está bien así?
Se apaga así.
Ahí está apagada.
Y ahí está prendida. X,
Sí.
pasas el cuadrado, le pegas al arco.
Apagada,
Apagada.
prendida.
Bravo. ¿Cómo se llama el aparato?
MP4.
MP4, muy bien. Le enseñamos a la Babi a llamar por teléfono, mami. Mira, mami, mira, mami.
A ver, te miro.
Yo no puedo saber tu contraseña.
No.
¿Por qué?
Porque si no, me la pueden hackear y me pueden robar el usuario. Bueno,
De computadora.
es una máquina que puedes cliquear y si querés cliquear alguna cosa, puedes buscar información, como buscar información de los indígenas, buscar información. De verdad no sabe. Mi abuela ya aprendió a cerrarla porque ni sabía abrirla. Se la pasa hasta el bolero. ¿Entendiste? No entendió.
Well, this is advertising. This is the kingdom of mythologies. As Roland Barthes said, this is the mythology of digital natives, obviously. I'm not going to discuss that. You already know that this idea of digital native, this new generation, that they come with the chip and the processor under the arm. Sorry. What happened here? Sorry. This concept introduced by Prensky 15 years ago, he has already also changed that. That was a first basic reaction. Children, all the children they arrive within in the DNA, they have new skills. Well, we know that that's not the real situation. We have a lot of children, teenagers that they really have a lot of skills in this field, and many others that they do not have this skill. At the same time, we have many adults with a lot of skills and other adults that maybe, like the grandparents in this specific video, that they do not know how to deal with the new technologies. Well, this question, what are teenagers, youth, children doing with media outside the school, is one of the questions that we start thinking before developing this research project. What are youth doing with media outside the school? So we can reflect on that. What do teenagers do outside? Well, they play a lot. Obviously, video games are a media. They play a lot. Now we are in our field work that we having worked in the last 2-3 months. League of Legends, or LOL, is one of the favorite online games today. Well, we know that teenagers and children, they spend a lot of time playing with smartphone, playing with tablet, playing with consoles, or playing with PC. This is one of the classics right now. For example, 2 weeks ago, I was interviewing a teenager. This boy told me that he arrives home, he lunch, and then he plays 2 games. That's about 3-4 hours in League of Legends. He plays with some friends, some online friends also, and they organize. Sometimes they use Snapchat for organizing the game. Okay, today at 4 we meet, okay, blah, and then they work together. Well, you know very well this. We have a lot of research also about the skills that can be developed in video game, the skills that you need to develop to survive, to organize, and to articulate your game with other people. So I think this is one of the key points in this geography of what are young people doing with media outside the school. Questions: how do they learn to do this? Because my son and my daughter, they're teenagers, but when they don't know how to, they have a problem in a video game, they will never ask me, and they will never ask the professor. Where do they learn to maybe to go to the next level in a video game, or how to survive in a video game? Well, we don't know. We know nothing about that. Where do they learn? Yeah, we suppose that the YouTubers, because we have specific YouTubers that they produce gameplay videos, we suppose that they are learning something there, or online forums, and so on. Or maybe asking other friends with more skills. How do they share that knowledge also? Is another interesting question that we can start thinking. So we have this area of video games. Okay, we don't know a lot about what's going on in this field outside the school. Fan fiction. If you go to, for example, this website, fanfiction.net, you will find 720,000 stories of Harry Potter written by fans. Obviously, not of them are teenagers, but we have a lot of teenagers producing fan fiction. For example, in our field work, we have found many girls producing fan fiction with Wattpad. At the same time, for example, in a group of 25 students in a public school of Barcelona, we found 3 or 4 girls already producing fan fiction in Wattpad. And the professors, they didn't know anything about this. In other schools, professors had never heard about Wattpad. And maybe in the classroom they have students producing fan fiction. We found girls. I don't want to. These are the first outputs of very huge research. I don't want to say girls are producing fan fiction and boys are game playing. We also found many girls playing, but the boys, they talk a lot. But when you interview the girls, they are very good players and they spend a lot of time playing also. Fan fiction, the first things we detected seems to be a more for girls environment, but I can't say that. We found girls correcting the fan fictions of other girls, of other writers. They didn't know that this is called a beta reader, because fan fiction, in the big fan fiction environment, is a semi-professional field practically, where they have a division of labor. Well, they are doing that. They don't know how to create, they don't have the concept. I'm a beta reader. No, but they are doing that. So they are organizing, they are developing skills, they are controlling the quality of what they are doing. Well, the question is where did they learn to do this? They also are producing videos. In our field research, we found teenagers producing videos or video clips because maybe they have a music group and they start playing with the videos. So this is another field that we should research more. All the huge area of fan fiction, fan vid, user-generated contents, we have different names for this. In this area, I would include also cosplay, this idea of going to the Salón del Manga, the manga fair in Barcelona with like a otaku, and so this is part of the participatory cultures. This area that Henry Jenkins, other people, they have worked a lot. So this is also part of this area. Okay. If you look for fan fiction, or go to YouTube, go to fanfiction.net, or go to specific websites around Harry Potter. So this is an area. Where do they learn to produce fan fiction? Where do they learn to use Wattpad? How do they learn? Where do they learn to do this correcting other things? If in many cases the professors, the literature professors or the Spanish or Catalan professors, they have no idea about Wattpad. Where did they learn to do that? Well, this is another area. Finally, we have social networks. Sometimes, teenagers, they are more conscious about security than parents, about pictures, identity, sometimes. How do they construct their identities? How do they share content online? What did they learn to manage all these social networks? Because I'm not talking, they are not using Facebook. Practically, they do not even use Facebook. They are combined different networks. And it's not the same a picture in Instagram than a picture in Snapchat. That's a difference, very important today. The pictures for Instagram are pictures of postureo, as we say now. They spend a lot of time preparing the picture because this picture is an album, will last. Snapchat pictures, they will survive 24 hours. So maybe the quality is not important, it's just the moment, catch the moment. So they know perfectly what kind of picture they need for each media. So we don't know a lot, or nothing even in some cases, about these transmedia skills, let's call transmedia skills, and informal learning strategies. We do not know a lot about that. So that's why we talk about moving from media literacy to transmedia literacy. Traditional literacy was about written text, was about reading, the semiotics of the media. We have the support was printed books. The objective of the action was to create critical readers and writers. Interpellation, it was a nini. Doesn't know how to read, doesn't know how to write. main theoretical references, maybe linguistics, traditional literacy. Media literacy is more multimodal, it's more audiovisual, television. The big media support was broadcasting. The final objective of the action was to create critical spectators, this idea of resisting television, and many cases also sometimes production, critical production. Interpellation as a consumer. You're a consumer, pay attention to the product you are consuming because it's not good for you. You are eating a lot of sugar, something like that. So you have to stop that, you have to know how to manage that. And on the other side, we have the theoretical basis of that, as I said in the beginning of the intervention, is the traditional theory of effects of the mass communication research. Our idea of transmedia literacy, what we are thinking right now, this is not a theory, this is not a consolidated model, these are our previous hypotheses, conceptual hypotheses and concepts we are working around. It's multimodal. It's not only about audiovisual, we are also working with interaction, digital media, and transmedia storytelling, because this structure where you tell the story in different media and platforms, it also needs some skills, transmedia skills also, for connecting everything. It's not the same watching one movie that is not the same that connecting the narrative universe of Star Wars, where you have comics, you have books, you have video games, you have the movie, etc., etc. The new support is media, digital media, digital networks. I think the final objective of this action should be to create critical prosumers, to integrate these both features, production and consume. Interpellation as a prosumer, because we consider these teenagers people that are also consuming but also producing things, and basis, the theoretical basis of this, cultural studies, ecology of media. We are working a lot of applying anthropology also. Okay, when we talk about transmedia literacy, in our first approach, we are dealing with 3 areas. I don't know if at the end of our research, we will still have these 3 areas, or maybe 2 or maybe 5. We don't know that. This is our first approach. We map the different research about this. So we have a video game literacy, skills around video games. We have also this web social network literacy. We could also include some information, how to search for information, could be inside this area. And the other one is participatory literacy, or participatory cultures literacy, or collaborative cultures literacy. This is more the more Jenkins, Saito area, Dana Boyd, you already know who I'm talking about. So this is our first, more or less, map that we are working on this. As I told you before, maybe at the end of the research we will have a different map of these areas. Many of them are connected because maybe you produce a video from a video game and machinima, and then you share it on the social networks, or it's part of collaborative culture. So they are not isolated places, these ones, okay? They're very connected. Right now I'm coordinating 2 research projects. One is a Spanish project. It involves 5 communities. We have a group working, obviously, Barcelona and Vic. We have a group working in La Coruña, Madrid, Córdoba, and Alicante. Okay, we have 5 groups working on this. On the other side, we have a big international project. It's an Age 2020 project, but we have 8 countries. We have Colombia, we have Uruguay. We were very interested in Uruguay because, because they have the Ceibal program, so every teenager, they have a computer at home, so it was interesting to include them. Australia is participating. We have Finland, UK, Portugal, Italy, and Spain. Okay? Both projects started last year. We spent practically 1 year testing the methodology, working the theoretical field, preparing the security protocols, because we are working with teenagers. That's very complex, and especially when you have different countries, because more or less in Europe we have the same protocols, but for example in the United Kingdom they are different, and Uruguay is completely different. But we have to respect the European protocols about security, about the secure server for the information, so it's very, very complex. But we started the field work in January practically, so now in both projects we are working with schools. In this image you can see more or less the structure of our research. Practically we work with the schools because the place where teenagers are. The first step is a survey, everyone in the group. We are working with teenagers from 12 to 14 and also from 15 to 18. It depends on each country, more or less, the bachillerato, ESO, it depends, the separation in each country, but we try to work with different groups, age groups. And the first approach is to a survey where we can collect information about them, about consume, about practices, and that's good also for us for selecting the people into groups, because after that we organize 2 different workshops. Our original idea was to create focus groups, but working with teenagers, we say, let's create something more funny for them, so we have workshops. One workshops are about video games and the other workshops are about participatory culture. In both of the workshops, we talk also about social networks. So we cover these 3 areas I presented before. We have this workshop, we work there, we take notes, we take pictures, we video, register everything, and after the workshops, unfortunately, we can't interview everyone, so we select 5 students from each workshop, and we interview them. The main objective of these both projects is not to analyze the level of digital literacy of students or teenagers. No, it's not a sociological research about the medium level of, no. We already have a lot of projects like that, the Sonia Livingstone projects in 25 European countries. We have a lot of information about that should be updated every year. But it's not that kind of research. Our main objective is to detect transmedia skills in these areas, in students, teenagers, especially skills developed outside the schools, and informal learning strategies. What do you know to do with this media, these video games? Where did you learn to do that? These are the main concepts, objectives of the research. Our research at the end, and this is very important for European Union, we will publish a book, our papers, publish or perish, and we are going to organize a final conference, but we are also going to produce a professor's kit. We are going to produce a web portal with different didactic activities based on these skills. So, if a professor detects inside the classroom there are a couple of video game players, or detects people writing fan fiction, or whatever, we will propose activities that they can apply in the classroom to exploit these skills. What's happening, for example, today? This is an example from Argentina. A professor told me, yes, I would like to do, but I do not know how to upload a video in YouTube. I do not know how to upload a video in YouTube. And then, well, the ministry should organize a course for us. But what happens if inside the classroom you have at least one student that knows how to do that? Exploit that knowledge. When Paulo Freire, 50 years ago, said, conversation is not a linear transfer of information, everybody knows something, share that, he was talking about this. So, many times professors are waiting, I need a course, the Ministry of the Public Administration should organize me a course. Maybe inside the classroom you have people that know how to do that. Exploit that and integrate the real world outside the school with the world of the school. So this is the final activity of the project. Research plus a proposal, different activities to be used inside the classroom. Now next month we will start processing information. So in 2017 we will start maybe publishing the outputs, and in the beginning of 2018, we will produce the final dissemination and diffusion of the outputs of the research, and we will have this portal with the professor's kit. Thanks for your attention. These are my coordinates. I think we have time for...
Yeah, we have time for questions.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for your presentation, so interesting and so enrichment. But I have a question. You have presented us a very interesting and very rich insight on how media literacy is evolving, and probably more precisely on how in transmedia literacy, what kind of transmedia literacy is needed for the present time. But my question is, what is the objective of your research? What is to find the way to contribute to the expansion of this kind of literacy, or have we any chance to intervene in the way they are being expanding, controlled by the corporations who create and design the technologies?
Well, always I speak about media literacy. It seems that I'm against media literacy. I have to improve my presentation about that. I'm against, and this from my media experience in media studies, I'm against these basic theories of effects of media, a classic of media studies. So, because we know that media are very complex and we can't reduce that to negative effects of media. I'm not against media literacy. I was thinking about changing these 3 columns because you may have the sensation that this is outdated. Oh, media literacy, that's old. No, media literacy, now it's old. No, I was thinking about changing the presentation because maybe there could be circles. Literacy is inside media literacy, and transmedia literacy maybe is the 3rd circle that includes also traditional media literacy. So I'm not against media literacy. We should continue with media literacy. We should teach in the classroom how to work with media, how to deal with media. We should teach about ideology, and we also, this production area is good. But I think media literacy is focused on that. It's a school-centered discourse and practice. And we say, okay, but teenagers, young people is doing things with media outside school. We are not watching that. So we are just moving our microscope to that part of the world. And the idea is to integrate that. So don't have this perception that I'm against media literacy. No, I think at the end we should integrate everything. And we detect things that are going on outside the school. When we are talking about recovering, exploiting this knowledge inside the school, that would be part of media literacy program. Okay? And that's the idea. That's the idea. But what our perception was that media literacy was not analyzing this. And that's okay, because in research you must focus. And people may say, okay, but you are not taking care about ideology. In our research, no. Because we have other people doing that. You can analyze everything. But at the same time, in the beginning I said we have this repetition. We have an institution, school, educational schools, new technologies, no, outside, after 5, 10, 15 years, we accept them because we have new barbarian technologies. Now Alessandro Barico is talking a lot about the barbarians attacking us. Well, the book was a barbarian in one moment. Writing technology was a barbarian for Plato 2,500 years ago. One of the most important psychologists of new media is Sherry Turkle. In the early 90s, she published a couple of important books about not social networks, virtual communities, changes of identity. She works in the MIT in Boston, Sherry Turkle. She has a book, famous book called Life on a Screen, The Second Self, Vida en las Pantallas, by dos. And she was one of, in this part of this cyberculture discourse, very close to Negroponte, a very optimistic point of view about that. Now, 20 years later, 20 years older, she published a book called Alone Together. I heard her in a conference a couple of years ago in New York, and she said, okay, I arrived home, and I found all my daughters with the mobile phones, and they were not talking each other. That's terrible. There are no conversations. At least with television, we used to talk. Hey, no, you have been 50 years analyzing the bad effects of television on children, and now you tell me that television is good. So, we have, I think media ecology is good and media evolution is good because you have a different vision of that. So maybe in 10 years, people will say, Snapchat, I remember starting Snapchat, everyone was with the mobile phone, exchanging information, because I can't imagine the next technology that will kill us. So don't keep this so close vision of everything, because these processes have been repeated many times. The arrival of the novel in 19th century, we know what happened. Barico talked a lot about that, also Vargas Llosa, Madame Bovary. Madame Bovary was terrible. The women were reading, and the husband used to write home, and where is the food? It's right there, I'm reading. And later in the bedroom, listen, I'm reading Madame Bovary, take care of yourself. Well, they are right to the adjustment process about that. And if you read what they used to say about novels, it's the same that we say today about video games. Inappetence, you're closing your world, it's terrible for conversation. So we have these kind of discourses every time we have new technology, new media. So when you take distance from that, I think we can discover many things. Okay?
More questions?
More questions? There.
Good afternoon. My name is Otto. First of all, it's a pleasure to you have here. And second, sorry that this is not education-related question. I will be interested in your opinion. It is said that Netflix is a new television, a new global television. And in your opinion, if it is really a global television or if it is more big on-demand service, and second, if you think that for the future it will be a main starting point for creating transmedia projects.
Okay, the second question about the future, I always say it's impossible. This is a complex system, so it's very difficult, it's impossible to make provisions, to say, okay, in 15 years will happen this or that. It's impossible. Because if we analyze the last 10, 15, 20 years, for example, in the 90s, in the moment of cyber cultures, how will be the future in 2015, 16? Well, everyone will be floating in virtual reality. No, we have a blended reality device in the pocket, and so it's different. So what about the future? I don't know. What we can do is analyze the last evolution of media in the last centuries, maybe, and then imagine possible scenarios. That's all. About transmedia, I think if we go to the commercial area, do you mean transmedia in education or transmedia in commercial field? In education? Commercial. Well, companies are going transmedia because, as I told you before, this. Traditional companies cannot survive here because I used to produce only books, I produce only video games, I produce comics. It's impossible to survive for a big company, for a little company, and for a single professional. It's impossible to survive producing content for only one media because the state of fragmentation, atomization is so big. So the big corporation, fusion. little companies, they are working together many times because they receive a project from a client and they maybe have 4 or 5 employees and, oh, it's not enough. Okay, let's call our friends from the other. So they are competitors and sometimes they cooperate. That's the structure. In many of these territories, for example, in London, there's a neighborhood of little companies, media, digital, and sometimes they're competitors, and sometimes they work together. Like a big organism, they put together different cells. And maybe when the project finishes, they are competitors again. I think the idea in Barcelona with 22 arroba was something like that, no? To create an environment so you have a little company. Well, and the same for professionals, for single professionals. If you say, okay, yes, I'm a photographer, okay, but you have to produce photograph, you must know how to produce photograph for different media. Okay. So I think they must go transmedia if they want to survive. It's a necessity. The first part of the question was about, that's the problem when you start with the second. Netflix. Well,
if it is,
but this, see, today the new television, well, is one of the new actors, is growing up. I think that we still have traditional broadcasting. We have YouTube. We can't exclude YouTube if we talk about the new audiovisual environment, obviously. And Netflix is one of the new things that's growing up. But it's very, very interesting to see the evolution of Netflix. Netflix was born 15 years ago as a company for renting DVDs. It was a company of Blockbuster. They were renting the material, the real DVD, and see the evolution of that company. So maybe a company that now is producing bottles of water, maybe in 10 years will be the main producer of media contents. I don't know. Apple is producing watches, and Amazon is producing TV series. But Netflix now, I think, if you can imagine in this media ecology, sometimes some technologies, some companies, some formats, or some parts of this network are more active than other parts. So if you see the audiovisual area of this social network, maybe Netflix is one of these elements that it's moving a lot, is establishing interfaces with other media, other companies, other technologies. Maybe 10 years ago, Nokia was in the same situation, was moving, interacting with other companies. Netflix, I think, right now is one of the companies that's doing moving a lot, creating interfaces, evolving faster than the other ones. I've been in Saudi Arabia last week. There are no cinemas in Saudi Arabia. They're prohibited. So you have huge malls, commercial centers. And here's something strange, because you have the big brands, you have the food court for eating, something, cinemas. No, are prohibited cinemas in Saudi Arabia. And what do? We have Netflix. So we'll see the disruption power of this. How can you control contents in a society where many people, they have Netflix? How can avoid people watching specific movies? So I think Netflix is an important actor right now, yeah. Not only, they are changing the aesthetics, they are changing the way of consuming television. This idea of one day you have 13 episodes of House of Cards, never in the history of television we had something like that. Never in the history of seriality we had something, this breaking seriality. It's a on-demand seriality. You watch the episode when you want, and they're creating new consume practices. Oh, this weekend I watched the whole second season of House of Cards. So, well, these are really new. So I'm very happy to be living this moment as a media researcher. I'm really happy. I prefer this chaos. Every day we have a surprise.
More questions?
Yes, me. Hello.
Hi.
My name is Andrea. And my question is about the concept and the birth of transmedia storytelling. Do you
The verb?
The appear,
Sorry, but I can't hear very well from here. Go ahead. I can't hear very well from here.
My question is about the concept of transmedia storytelling,
Yeah.
the born.
Okay.
The born.
Okay.
So, do you think that it appeared in, well, you talk about two contexts or two sides, new media and old media. Do you think that transmedia storytelling appeared in this context of new media as a way to make the old media survive to new media, or maybe it exists before this context? Maybe it has always existed, but as another way to what understand as transmedia storytelling nowadays.
About the conceptual and theoretical issues, in the 90s I was living in Italy producing CD-ROMs, multimedia CD-ROMs. Okay, in the early 90s I was a first row company. We were one of the most advanced companies producing CD-ROMs in Italy. We produced CD-ROMs for the newspapers, for telecom company, so with video, 3D environments, all the things that we couldn't do on the web because the transfer rate was very low. We produced that on CD-ROMs. And we were sure that as soon as the web would have enough transfer rate, the CD-ROM would be dead as a platform, and that happened, okay? Well, we started producing multimedia because we were really a multimedia company. We are producing CD-ROMs with video, 3D environments, text, videos, infographics, pictures, navigation, hypertext. It was a real multimedia company. And we used to work with many other professionals, photographers, musicians, people coming from desktop publishing. Okay. At the end of the 90s, all of these people were producing multimedia because it was easy to say, okay, oh, this is the copy and paste in music. It works in Photoshop. Oh, I can move this in Photoshop. I can move it also in PageMaker. So at the end of the 90s, every company was producing multimedia, and everyone was producing websites. So in one moment, the concept of multimedia in the commercial environment, in the professional environment, was not a difference. And if you want to sell your product, you have to introduce a difference. So 20 years later, Transmedia was born in 2003. Transmedia Storytelling was born in 2003. The article published by Henry Jenkins in Technology Review, 15 January 2003. Was born in an academic environment, the concept. I interviewed for my book Henry Jenkins. I asked him, well, how did you arrive to this idea? Well, I went to a meeting with people from Hollywood, video games, and they were talking about telling a story in different media and the fans. And I said, oh, Transmedia Storytelling. Ah, good, okay, well, that's all. 5 years later, Hollywood started talking about transmedia because of this fragmentation, how we can connect that. Okay, so they start thinking in transmedia from a strategic point of view. And we have a lot of research about transmedia from a semiotic point of view, from a more ethnographic approach, a Henry Jenkins approach, etc., etc. I think we have the academic discourse or theoretical discourse, and we have the professional discourse. I think that transmedia in the professional environment in 5, 10, 80 years, I don't know, everyone will be doing transmedia, I guess. So maybe in 10 years, the law of Moore, the semantic law of Moore will create a new one, a new concept. Because if all the companies, advertising, journalism, all the professionals are saying, we produce transmedia, nobody will sell anything. So someone will invent something new. And that's okay. It happened with multimedia in the 90s, it's happening now, or will happen, I am sure, with transmedia in a few years. Academic discourse environment, it's a different thing. In the late 80s, the hypertext, el hipertexto, was fashionable. Nobody's selling hypertext right now. But you produce hypertext, website, and whatever. So I think in academic environment, we should not care a lot about that. Because when we fix a concept, I don't know, semiotics, the concept of sign, you have two definitions, pairs, saussure. Okay, they are more than 100 years ago, we have this definition, and that's okay. So once we have more or less a clear definition, we keep that. We don't have to follow the the semantic law of Moore of the markets. Okay? In this case, it's very interesting to see that transmedia was born in academic environment and then was adopted by professionals. Usually, it's in the other side, in the other way, because now we, academics, we talk about Web 2.0. It's horrible, but comes from marketing. It's a concept, a marketing concept. What about transmedia? Is it transmedia so new? Well, now we have the concept, but transmedia practices are not new, because here we have Star Wars. This transmedia narrative war started in '77. We could talk about Star Trek, a transmedia narrative war that was born in '66. We could talk about Superman. Superman was born in 1938, and in the 40s was in radio, and in the 50s was in television, and the 70s was in cinema. And we have also user-generated content. We could talk about, I don't know, the war of the wars. H.G. Wells and Orson Welles. It's a transmedia war that started more than 100 years ago. We could talk about Sherlock Holmes. So transmedia practices are not so young. So why we talk a lot about transmedia? But I think there's a difference. But this idea of telling a story in different media and platforms, so that idea is not new, obviously. User-generated content, well, in the 30s we had the first convention of science fiction. So we have, in the early 20th century, we have fan fiction experiences. And the problem is to recover old fan fiction, because we didn't have YouTubes or platforms like that. But I have found new stories of Sancho Panza and Don Quixote in the late 19th century. So we can, in this transmedia archaeology, I have a book called Transmedia Archaeology with a couple of friends. We analyzed Superman, Conan the Barbarian, in an Argentinian comic called El Eternauta. So we can go deeper in the past. I always say maybe the Bible or the Christian narrative is a transmedia experience, because it's a 2,000 years experience, a narrative. And it is transmedia because the story of Jesus has been told in different ways, in the churches, in iconography, books. We have a trailer, the Catechism. It's a short version. We have a prequel, the Old Testament. And what else? And this literature, this narrative has expanded. We have a lot, in 2,000 years, we have saints, martyrs. We have the ex voto, these little images people used to paint for say thanks to the Virgin, for saving my children. I don't know. So they have, in Italy, there are many good examples of this popular expansion of the traditional Christian narrative. Do we have user-generated content? Yes. If you go to Rome, in the catacombs, in these places, you will find graffitis that they are 2,000 years old. You will find graffitis against and pro-Christians. So more or less, that's transmedia, yeah. But now I think the big difference is we have digital networks and we have digital text. So digital texts are very easy to manipulate, to transform. Years ago, to produce a movie, to change something, to put subtitles to Mourinho, or to put subtitles of Hitler, so it was impossible for a single person. Now it's very easy. So the digitalization facilitates the manipulation of text and the circulation and sharing of this text. So this is a big change. And I think now transmedia is more and more and more a strategy. Before used to be an ocean, maybe, we produce this, it works, okay, let's expand it. Now I think people start more or less thinking in transmedia. So when they are producing a new thing, fiction, not fiction, they're more and more thinking in developing a transmedia strategy. Maybe not in the beginning, you do not produce for all the media, but you planify that. Okay, if it works, I'm going to produce a video game, then we are going to produce a comic. So I ask my friends and colleagues and professionals to start thinking in transmedia. because it's important for the survival in the new media ecology, I guess.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really interested to know your opinion about how, according to your studies, what you're doing, your research project, what are the main blocks, in your opinion, for the promotion of transmedia literacy in schools? What have you found out? And in your opinion, how can we change the formal environment of learning setting to adapt to the transmedia literacy?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. There are already experiences of transmedia literacy or producing this. Not exactly recovering these the skills that teenagers are developing outside the school. Maybe they are, and we have not detected them, obviously. Maybe at the end of our research, and after our research, especially if we have this portal, it will be an open portal in the sense that people may share experiences around this also. But now, for example, in Medellin, in Colombia, they have a media lab in EAFIT. I have this image here because I was sure that I wanted to share with you this. EAFIT is a university in Medellin, and they have a media lab, and they have also a master in transmedia for media professors and professionals. They are also applying transmedia in school, in peripheral schools in Medellin. So, for example, they have worked the Odyssey with students, so practically they ask the student to expand that. Okay? Here we have experiences, for example, one of my PhD students, Noemi, I don't know if she's here, no, she was here in the last days, she's from Mexico. Her PhD thesis was about applying transmedia inside the classroom, and it was an experimental thesis, and she has applied transmedia strategy inside the classroom in literature and in history, and analyzed how they work, the implementation of transmedia strategies. So in this case, they were working with the Odyssey, and they asked the students to expand the story in different media, expand the characters, and they also produce videos. They produce videos with the support of the school and the media lab. So the professors, students, they wrote stories. Okay, in Medellin, in this part of Colombia, they have a specific music that's called the trova, la trova. It's not the classical Cuban trova, it's more close to vallenato and more, I don't say cumbia, but more or less. And they produce a new version of the Odyssey applying this music. I have the video. Well, I think this may be an answer to your question. It is in Spanish. It's a parody of the Odyssey.
Ulises se encontraba en la isla de Calixto, ella estaba enamorada, el héroe le mueve el piso, lo tenía embelesado con su hermosa belleza, también con tantas palabras a Ulises lo embeleza.
Sorry, you understand Spanish because it's very funny.
Los dioses se reunieron en una gran asamblea. Ulises vuelve a Itaca, pero algo trama tenea, pues ella se ha disfrazado y fue al palacio de Ulises. Sabrás a continuación a Telemaco que dice: Atene al hijo de Ulises, le dijo que lo buscara. Primero se fue a Pilos y Esparta después él para. Allí donde Menelao cuenta el destino de Troya, pues lo único que sé es que Troya está en la olla.
Okay, I think that to tell a story in different media, more or less in education we are doing that. We do not have any only written books. We have images, infographic, and we use video. So this part of transmedia storytelling, I think more or less we are working on that. I think the most important contribution of commercial transmedia logic for schools and education is this one, user-generated content, or from user-generated content to student-generated content. If you say students, you have to read the Odyssey. Oh, we have to read. We are going to produce a project where you are, okay. Think about video games. I think our teenagers, they are experts in Second World War. They do not know who Napoleon was. Why? Because they do not have video games about Napoleon. That's all. So, user-generated content, student-generated content. Why not transforming ideas of people like Alejandro Pisitelli has talked a lot about this, transforming the classroom in a workshop, production, and the traditional educational content is part of the project. So for producing this, you have to read this, you have to watch that, confront, look for different versions, but produce more. And maybe next year, other students may work with the user-generated content and transform it. In the late 80s, when it was the boom of hypertext, George Landau, in the he was in what university? In the Brown University. He was teaching literature, and he was using hypertext before the web. And they had a story space, an internal platform. So students were reading different short stories, Borges, Cortázar, and so on. So they connected the hypertext. They included other stories, the intertextuality of this, and they produced short essays about that. The next year, other students work with the same material and enrich the network. So user-generated contents, I think this is the way, and this could be a good thing. I think this could be the great contribution of this transmedia logic. Not just telling the story in different media, because that could be a more sophisticated broadcasting. I think this idea of producing and the experience of these teenagers in our workshops is really great. They really enjoy that. We have an advantage. We break the everyday processes. So this is the new thing. But the professors told me, oh, they really love working with that. Well, try you also to do these kind of things. But I think this idea of producing content is really great. Maybe it's better than creating a hypertext or reading a hypertext or consuming different media, producing for different media. And here we have the union with traditional media literacy, because media literacy is also teaching, explaining how to produce with media. Okay.
To conclude, in this regard, I would like to ask you, what do you think that has to be the new role of teachers? Because it's not like before, like a more vertical structure of the class, is more horizontal and collaborative space.
Yeah, I think in that sense, I think it's very clear in the books, the new professor, the new teacher. Paulo Freire talked a lot about this 50 years ago. Conversation, dialogue is not against this banking conception that I know, you don't know, I transfer. It's the same. We should work with this. The conceptual model is very clear. The problem is to introduce and change the everyday reality. I work at university. I have 90 students, and I am alone. So we have a huge pressure for doing broadcasting. I try to break that. I have to reduce my interventions a lot, but it's difficult. But I think we should insist with that. I think in the conceptual area, I think it's very clear what we should do. To break this power is politics, as Paulo Freire said. Because a professor that recognizes that he or she doesn't know how to upload a video in YouTube and recognize that the student knows, that's a politics breakdown, a power breakdown inside the classroom. But that was the proposal of Paulo Freire, to change the political relationship inside the classroom, breaking the walls of the classroom, also the concept of classroom. So I think that's, in a definition, roles, I think we should go in that way. The problem is, I guess, the limits of this institution, but we must try and continue trying.
Thank you very much.
No, thanks for the question. We can hear it again.
With the formal learning.
So thank you very much for sharing your vast knowledge, Carlos Scolari, with us. And I have reached the end of the Congress, and I introduce you. Luis Corominas is the representation of the Dean of Kim Major, the Dean of Tourism, and I give you the word to closing the Congress.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Dear professors, academics, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Dean of the Faculty of Tourism, I am pleased to say some words in the closing sessions, which pretends to be like a positive feelings around the conference that ends today. In these 3 days, we have the opportunity to share some knowledge, experience with all speakers that we have integrated their communication spaces in this Congress. Their expertise, their proximity have enriched the debate and the reflection. In the first talk, Robert Pattern opened our eyes talking about the application for transmedia education. I also was following through a streaming, and some of his words that was really interesting, where a mission of his company was to make everybody's life an adventure. So this is really also important for the students that you have, or we have, but you teach. So it's kind of a goal, a challenge for these students in order to discover the knowledge. So this, that the students have to live the career or their studies like an adventure. I think this transmedia can help a lot, the students and also professors. Then also roundtables. Have been a lot of the different experience over this conference on communication, education, and transmedia. And just now, Carlos Scolari in the closing speech, where I enjoy a lot, I learn a lot, explain us about this motivation that we have to follow this path in order to adapt our teaching methods for this transmedia reality that we have nowadays. I don't want to end without mentioning the contribution of the 5 panels, interesting panels that have developed during these days in the conference, with a special emphasis with the panel formed by the representative of different institutions of the various Erasmus Plus projects. I'm sure that panels help a lot to solve doubts for the ones that are thinking on applying European Erasmus Plus projects, especially in the category K2. So, and we thank everyone who's attended the conference, especially also all the staff, all the organization that makes everything perfectly and also on time. So, I hope that it have been a enriching conference for everybody, and we hope that you enjoy Girona also, you can be in Girona again, and next time also meetings for sharing new experience. So, now we can close this international conference for communication and education by transmedia. Thank you very much.